if you're watching the replay, also hello. You get a hello too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't mention this earlier. It is like full-fledged spring here. Just everything has bloomed. And I have been very spoiled the last few months to have like zero allergies at all. And now they have
Yeah.
all hit me this morning. So um, if I have to mute a couple times, that is probably why.
Fair enough.
But I'm feeling okay right now. I took some medicine earlier. I think it's finally kicked in. But yeah, welcome everyone. We're gonna be chatting about like all sorts of stuff today. We're gonna be talking a lot about like overlooked markets and just kind of maybe some things that have taken over the photography industry, some mindsets and stuff like that. But I have my friend Nathan Holritz back on the show. And I should have looked up when you were on last. It was years ago, which is crazy. But yeah, anyway, I guess we can get started. Actually, I'm going to look that up before we get started because I always like to have a good like number on there.
Yeah, it is interesting. How long have you been in podcasting now, John? How many episodes is this?
This one, let's see. This one I think is going to be like 210.
Awesome.
Something like that.
Plenty of podcasts have fallen by the wayside, so way to keep going.
Thanks. You were definitely a big inspiration for getting into the podcast because I liked your style with Bokeh. Yeah, man, you were back in July of 21.
Whoa.
Yeah. So
now I want to go back and listen to that. That's wild.
Yeah, let me see. What did we talk about even? We talked about the missing business piece, which is brand position. Yeah, that one was a good one. I'm going to go back and listen to that too. So yeah, anyone listening in live right now, go check out episode 72 after this.
Cool.
Get your Nathan fix for the day. But yeah, well, Nathan Holritz, welcome back to the show. I am excited to have you back. Just looked up what episode you were last time you were here, episode 72, back in 2021, summer of 21. I don't really remember what I was doing summer of 21, but
I think we were still dealing with the pandemic pretty hardcore at that point.
Pretty hardcore, yeah. It's always like those first like 18 months is very blurry, especially like here in Texas, because we were like open and then closed and then open and then we were like, no, it's cool. And then like, oh no, it's not cool. And I'm like, I don't know, July of 21, we could have been acting normal or in our homes. But but yeah, I'm excited to have you back on the show and get to chat again. And I'll link that episode 72 in the show notes for everyone listening. Y'all can go listen to younger John and younger Nathan talk.
Hey, speak for yourself. I'm getting younger. What are you talking about?
I mean, yeah, seriously, yeah. I think both of us look better than we did 3 years ago. Like I said this earlier that you're like a big inspiration for getting into podcasting, and I loved Bokeh Podcast and just like your candidness with your I was going to say clients. That's not right. Your guests, and I was like, it wanted me to start a podcast, so it was like a big deal having you on the show back then when I was maybe like a year and a half into podcasting, and but yeah. Also, big inspiration with your fitness journey and everything. You had posted a like before and after from like whenever you were like 28 or something. And I was like, man, yeah, that's what, because I'm coming into 40 here in the next couple of years. And I was like, that's some good inspiration to really stay focused. I know that there's a lot of discipline and a lot of focus in health and just in a lot of things in life. So thanks for sharing.
No, well, and that's kind of you to say. Everything is always a learning curve. It feels like, even after doing 6 or 7 years of podcasting and over 600 episodes, I still, in some ways, kind of felt like a rookie because there was always something to get better at, something to learn. I think, especially when it comes to fitness, and this is probably true with podcasting too. I think there are kind of key ideas that do a lot of the heavy lifting if you're just consistent with them. Not you, but like people in general are consistent with them. And so when somebody sees what I've accomplished from a fitness standpoint, and for anybody who doesn't have context, I've lost 40, 50 pounds and have abs at 44, almost 45 years old. And I'm proud of that. But what has enabled that is not crazy, spending 3 hours a day in the gym or going on insane, crazy diets or anything really that crazy. It's really just the small stuff consistently that really does the heavy lifting. And I think it can be overwhelming, whether it's building a business or starting a podcast or getting into fitness, to consider all that lies ahead in order to get to whatever our goals are. And the reality is that it doesn't have to be overly stressful. If we do certain things consistently, just take small steps every single day, we'll get where we want to go, and probably even further than that. So I would throw that out there for the sake of encouragement for everybody. Whatever it is that you're doing, small steps consistently, it really makes a big difference.
Oh yeah. I love that mindset because it does, like, I get overwhelmed with looking at the finish line of what I want and just being like, ooh, I want to get there, whether it's, any aspect of life, whether, it's like waking up earlier. It's like, I want to wake up earlier, start my day earlier than, sleeping until the last minute before I need to get up and like make lunches for the kids and all of that. It's like taking baby steps of like setting, 10 minutes earlier and just easing your way in until like, okay, I'm just going to like go from waking up at 6:30 to waking up at 5:30 right away. And it's easy to look at the goal, the finish line, and get overwhelmed and just like, there's no way that I can even do that, so I'm not even going to try. But having those like little baby steps and just like, I'm just going to inch my way closer, and it might take a little while. But as you inch closer, you are literally closer than you were yesterday. And if you can get closer and closer every day, then you can look back and just be like, wow, I have come so far in the last 2-3 years. Than just waiting for that one giant step.
That's it.
So I love it. Okay. So Nathan, there's something new that I'm doing since you were on the show almost 3 years ago. I've asked some of the listeners to send in some questions, just like random questions, to get to know our guests more than just like what you do, where you're based, all that, which we will get into also. But I have a question from Ariel. She asks, what is your favorite local restaurant and why is it your favorite?
Ooh, yeah. So I just moved recently, and there's a place near where I'm living that is a Thai restaurant. And I've been going there probably way too much. I love curry. I love rice. I grew up in Japan, so I've eaten a lot of rice over my life. Curry, rice, and then they have this just beautiful lemongrass coconut soup that it's just to die for. I can't get enough of. So I'll go have that. I may throw in some chicken skewers, but I'll go have that. And it's weird because it's kind of a comfort meal. It tastes good, it feels good, but it's also quite healthy as well. So kind of a win-win all the way around, and probably makes it even more tempting as a result. But that's been one of my favorite as of late.
Oh, that sounds delicious. I used to not like lemongrass, and I didn't like super citrusy things, but there is something about lemongrass, just like as a seasoning, or like we have some like orange lemongrass tea that is just, it's got like the spicy like anise and stuff in it too. So it's just got that little bit of tingle in the back of your throat whenever you drink it. And it is it is our evening tea. Is just great to just sit down and have that. And I love just like sniffing the tea container while it's steeping and just like breathing in all the lemongrass. So that lemongrass coconut soup sounds amazing.
Incredible.
But okay, well, cool. I love it. Thanks for the question, Ariel. So Nathan, tell us a little bit about you, where you're based, and what you do.
I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is a couple hours outside of Nashville, a couple hours outside of Atlanta. And I started in wedding photography back in 2001 and shot weddings and portraits for about 10 years. During that time, I started a company called Photographers Edit. It's a post-production house. And over the last 16 years, we've processed millions and millions and millions of images for photographers around the world. 2016, I started the podcast we were talking about earlier, the Voca podcast, and for about 7 years, recorded about 640 episodes. Not only helping photographers build more successful businesses, but doing so in a way that's sustainable so that they don't get burnt out in the process. Mm-hmm. And then earlier this year, I started a company called Cheezoo, Cheezoo. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but it's a mobile platform that is focused on making professional photography accessible for the masses. So that's kind of what I've been doing professionally anyway for the last 22, 23 years. I have 2 kids. Both of them are out of the house at this point. They're in college. One's studying jazz saxophone at UTK, University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And my daughter's studying nursing at University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. And cool. So that's been a bit of a shift too in the last little while, getting used to this idea of just kind of being on my own again and reconsidering a lot about life in general. It's a real turning point. That the whole midlife crisis concept, it's very real for me at the moment. But good too. I mean, it's certainly an opportunity for growth. So yeah, that's the summary of where I'm at the moment.
Nice. Yeah, it's so interesting, like the different stages of life, because you don't really think about it too much. I mean, like there's like the big, get married or have like a kid or like start this big career or something like that. But like, but yeah, like I have been thinking our oldest is 9 right now. We're still a long ways away from him leaving the house and going off on his own. But also not very long away. Cause we're halfway through, most likely, if he moves out at 18, we're halfway through all of that. And it's just like those big life changing moments allow you to really just kind of sit there and reconsider things and like, where do I want to go? What do I want to change? Are there like aspects of life that I want to shape up? We are, our youngest is 3.5. So we're like, we don't have, every time that we have 3 kids. So every time, twice. Once our kids got to about 3 years old, we had a newborn come in. Like it was just like that spacing. And this is the first time that we have a toddler who is the youngest, and we don't have a newborn. So we're not in that like zombie newborn stage. And like, this is very different for us. And we're thinking about like, oh, we can do different things. And like all the kids are out in daycare and school right now. So I can be free to record more podcasts and have meetings and like dive into more work and working on my business and stuff like that. So yeah, it's always great to just like kind of reconsider your life and what's going on, even before those big moments. But
for sure. And I would say, I think I'm kind of old for the photography industry. I'm almost 45. And I would say to everyone, it sounds so cliche, and then you experience it and you realize how real it is. Don't take for granted where you're at right now. Like whatever stage you're in your business, in your personal life, in your relationships, because man, you look back and you realize not only what you had, but then maybe what you could have had a little bit more of, you could have done a little bit better with. And certainly don't want to live in a space of regret, but it's also easy in the moment just to kind of coast and to go into autopilot and take for granted, even if we don't intend to take for granted what we have and where we're at. So I would just say to encourage everybody, soak it up. It does go by really fast. My kids are 22 and 19. Which is wild because I can look over here at a portrait of the 2 of them at 6 and 3, and that wasn't even that long ago. It's kind of crazy. So yeah, just soak it up wherever you're at.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I really like that of just like being present. Cuz I am
Mm,
my personality, I'm just like very future driven. I'm very much like, all right, let's get to the next thing, let's get to the next hurdle, or we did this. Like it took my wife bringing her into my life for me to like stop
mm,
and celebrate
mm,
wins,
hmm.
because like I would tell her like, hey, I did this, or I booked this wedding, or I did this thing, or I just hit 5 years in business or whatever.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, that's great, let's celebrate. And I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't think about celebrating, I was just like,
Yeah.
yay, I did this thing, on to the next. And
Hmm.
I think that is so important to stop and to soak in things, to celebrate your wins, to really live in the moment, as they say, uh, and that helps to not look back in 10 years and be like, oh, I wish I would have soaked that
Exactly.
in more.
Exactly.
So yeah, okay, Nathan, I love it. But like, okay, so I know we're talking about a few different things today. um, I'm a little curious about like how Cheezoo came about and all that. Did you see like a gap in the market, or like how did you bring out Cheezoo?
Yeah, and just to give a tiny bit more context, and for anybody who's curious, you can
Mm,
go to cheezoo.com, cheezoo.com. Uh, the name is actually based on a Japanese word, a Japanese word of sorts. So in Japanese culture, in which I grew up, a lot of times they'll use the English word and just pronounce it with their own accent or pronunciation. And so, for example, when we go to take a picture, we might say cheese. In Japan, they're using that word cheese and just saying it with their own accent, which is hai cheezu. And so it's a play on that word that ultimately means to smile. So that's what the word means. But uh, Cheezoo is basically, you can imagine the business model for Uber or Lyft. If you have the Uber or Lyft apps, you can be a driver or you can find a driver. Same idea, but for photography. So with the Cheezoo app, you can be a photographer or you can find a photographer, and more specifically, an affordable photographer.
mhm.
And to your question, John, yes, Cheezoo in large part I started because of a pretty big gap in the marketplace when it comes to serving those who have a more limited budget, both wedding photography and portrait photography. And I'll just speak to wedding photography specifically to give a bit more context. But the weddingreport.com is some data that I've used for years now. And it stayed pretty consistent. Roughly 70% or so of weddings photographed in the US are photographed for $2,000 and below. And then the next, it's 15 to 20% or so is from the 2 to 4 mark. And then everything above that, the 5 to 7% is everything above that. And yet, most established wedding photographers, and of course, the same ideas are applicable, I think, to portrait photography as well. But those
Mm,
wedding photographers are working to get into that top 5, 10, 15, maybe 20%, while there's this massive segment of the marketplace that is, it's not that there aren't photographers there, but a lot of times it's used as kind of a stepping stone. I'm just starting in photography, so I'm only going to charge
right.
$1,000 for a wedding or maybe $100 for a portrait session. But then the goal is to move out of that price bracket and on to shooting higher end clients. We get to shoot less, make more, have more freedom, flexibility. That's kind of the thought process. But meanwhile, there is a large segment of the economy that just, black and white objectively, because of limited amount of money that they make or that they have in their bank account or both, or and maybe in some cases that they just don't prioritize photography enough, but still understand that they need to have it. That they're not going to spend nearly as much on professional photography, portrait or weddings. And so I saw that opportunity and an opportunity to leverage technology to serve that segment of the marketplace at scale.
Mhm.
And that's what we're doing with Cheez It.
Nice. Yeah. I I I know you had mentioned that statistic multiple times, over the years on
Mm-hmm.
your Boca podcast, and it always, I was just like, every time you said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's a hugely overlooked area of the market, because as a wedding photographer, I was aiming to get out of that pocket, that
Yeah.
70% giant pool. And I was like, oh no, like my to be a photographer that's taken seriously in the industry, I need to be over $2,000. I need to be over $5,000. I need to be charging, 5 figures for a wedding. And that is, I mean, some people can do that. Absolutely. But like, it's something that I don't think we should, use as a stepping stool, or just like that's it, is just like, oh well, I can get out of here now, I can get out of this market and on to the next. And like, I do understand the idea of wanting to work less and earn more, which absolutely. But also, like, there's a ton of people who are not being served well, in that area.
Right.
And I love the idea of the Cheezoo app and everything, to be able to serve them, and also allow an easy access for photographers to come in and do that too.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a lot of it, in part, it's an observation of the marketplace and seeing an opportunity. I know we talked about brand position in the last episode that we did together, and we can kind of get into that more today if you want, because it's very much relevant to what we're doing with Cheezoo. But so yeah, looking at the market and saying, hey, there's this kind of big hole where there aren't a lot of people, at least intentionally going and building sustainable, scalable businesses serving this segment of the marketplace. The other thing, though, is what we're seeing happen with technology. Really kind of the big shift, I guess, happened back around 2005 when the industry started to shift from film to digital.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, even at that time, and having gone through that myself, there was this criticism of the digital technology and kind of minimizing of it and comparing it to film, and it's not as good and it's cheating because now you get to look at the back of the camera, and there's this automation kind of built in. But despite those criticisms, obviously the technology prevailed, and it's what enables us to run our businesses largely today. What's happening now, and it has continued to happen actually over the last number of years, is you see that technology, that digital photography, photographic technology, continuing to get smaller and smaller. So you'll notice, like, with the camera bodies are getting smaller, and then simultaneously you have companies like Zeiss and Leica who are applying their hardware to mobile phones that are being created by various companies, different companies. So you see this, what's almost like a merging, or the beginnings anyway, of the merging of these technologies coming together. And so while there's certainly opportunity in the market to serve this massive segment of the marketplace that is underserved in a sustainable, scalable way, I'm also seeing where the industry is going, what's happening with technology. And so we've created a platform that, with that vision in mind, is I guess ahead of that curve, going in that direction. Understanding that at the end of the day, whether it's 5 years from now or 10 years from now, the idea that we're photographing as, at that point, what would be considered normal professional photographers with something like this, with our phone, that's not going to be such a stretch. Right now, it's interesting, as we're running ads for Cheezoo, we have various people commenting on the ads or posts about the brand and the company, and the amount of negativity and criticism it's not surprising. I expected it to come.
Yeah.
But it's just very interesting because it's in so many ways short-sighted. It ignores what we just went through in that shift from film to digital not very long ago. It also ignores the reality of what's happening with technology right now. And we're just playing to that. Meanwhile, there are others who are kind of sitting back and criticizing the approach.
Yeah. And I think that's, you look at the people who criticized digital and just like, I will never do that. And a lot of them now have digital cameras. I had a friend who just bought his first digital camera last year, and he was always just like, no, film is the way to go, which I love film. I've got so many film cameras too, and incorporated in my work too. And that's like part of this too, is you could incorporate, like a DSLR type camera and the greater cameras that are going into phones now too. Like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I think that kind of like open-mindedness of how things are changing is really going to set people apart from those who can adapt and move on and continue, and those who are going to get stuck in the old age of what we're currently doing. In 10 years from now, things are going to look so different than they do now. And it's interesting. Friend of the show, Jason Vinson, he I think it was a couple years ago, he photographed an entire wedding on an iPhone. And until then, I was in that camp of like, someone would ask like, are you afraid that these new phones are coming out with the better cameras taking your job away? And I was like, I'm not afraid, and I'm still not afraid, but I had always thought of just like, well, they're completely different. You can't take great photos with your phone. And then he shot an entire wedding on an iPhone. And I was like, oh, these were taken with the same thing that's in my hand, just like, playing on Instagram. And like, there's that old thing of like, you can take a great photographer who knows composition and lighting and exposure and give them like a very old camera, an old, like even just like a point and shoot kind of old school digital camera, and then give a novice who knows nothing about photography a $6,000 camera, and the one who knows the craft is going to take the better photos, because it's not about the tool, it's about how they're using it. And yeah, I'm just loving that viewpoint into the phones and into our cameras that we are using every day with like our family and those around us, and just photographing our day to day, because they are really good. They're a lot better than the phone cameras that we had back in 2007 when the first iPhone came out.
Well, what I will say though about this is, I think it's something to consider for everybody in the industry, wherever you're at in your career, your photography career, or just business career in general. When you allow, I mean, the reality is technology is going to continue to move, and even quicker than ever at this point. And we're seeing that all around us. Part of the reason that digital photography got such criticism back in the day when that transition was still happening was because people's egos were at stake, right? They had built their professionalism and their business in some ways around the skill set that they had developed, that was a bit of a unique skill set that was limited by these relatively limited tools. When digital photography came around and it made access to good photography more mainstream, or more of a commodity, and no longer was the skill set that somebody developed over the span of 10, 15, 20 years that relevant anymore, it's hard to swallow that. It's hard to accept that, right? That's where we have to set this premonition of what it means to be a so-called professional or even a business owner aside, understanding that that is going to continue to morph over time, and especially when it comes to technology. So if we get so caught up in the idea that something has to be done in a particular way, and anything that comes along and changes that is subpar or less than, it's pretty short-sighted, because the reality is the world's going to keep moving, regardless of whether or not that person is open to it, interested in it, likes it, or otherwise. It's going to keep moving. So really the better approach, I think, is to keep, number one, certainly to keep an open mind as to where the world's going, where the marketplace is going, where the industry, whatever industry you're in, is going. And then also understand that in the process, if you're not willing to change and shift with the times, there's a good chance you get lost in the mix. You may be able to continue to run a business for X amount of time, but will you be as effective if you're not willing to, again, set aside old thought processes, set aside ego if need be, embrace technology, embrace the shift or shifts in the industry, in the marketplace, and run with those. And so I think that really needs to be considered. And again, we saw this happen in that shift from film to digital, and there was a lot of criticism around it, and criticism about the number of photographers coming into the marketplace. And to your point earlier, John, those are the very people now that are, the people that may have criticized back then, or that were being criticized for that matter, are now the ones that are running these incredible businesses using this technology that was supposedly cheating, air quotes, cheating. They're the ones leveraging that technology and ultimately building these amazing businesses around it. So let's not get so caught up in what we're used to and what we're comfortable with and what we thought was supposed to be, because the world is changing. And if we're not willing to change with it, we're going to miss out, particularly as business owners.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and like the world is changing so quickly now too, because like I forget like when certain things happen, but like even with just technology of like computers and how you look at 1993, or I guess 94 now is 30 years ago. 1994, the PCs, the home computers that we had,
Yeah.
like I remember in 94 going to a friend's house and they had a computer at home. It was just like this giant box, and it
Yeah.
was just like the green screen with like we couldn't do anything on there. We would just type
Yeah.
and then the letters would show up. But like that technology has changed so much between 94 and 2004, and then so much between 2004 and now, and between now and 2044 it's going to be exponentially like it's just compounding on itself, and things are growing at a much faster rate. When you talked about like people not embracing new technologies and kind of getting stuck in the old ways, it reminded me of that story of Blockbuster and like the how they were huge. Anyone listening who's a little bit younger, you don't remember Blockbuster, it was the place to be. Like for Friday night, you're just walking around a Blockbuster store
Yeah.
and you're pulling out all the VHS and the DVDs and looking at like, you know,
Yeah.
they would have that whole wall of like the new release, and you thought that they had all of the movies, but it was just the posters on there, and you're like, I missed them, and like it was so fun, and they were stuck in that mindset of like, no, the physical store is always going to be better than whatever
Mm.
this Netflix is doing
Mm.
with starting to stream stuff. Like no one wants to watch movies at your house. You want the experience of going to the store and picking out the movies and like buying your snacks there. And there was one person, I don't remember his name, but he was on the board and he was like, no, we need to like shift into doing streaming also.
Mm.
And they rejected that idea and said that that's just going to be a fad. People are coming back. And now you look and everything, like all the different, you got Paramount Plus and you got Disney Plus and you've got all of these different streaming services. And there is one Blockbuster store left in Bend, Oregon, and which I do want to go to. Like that would just be like so much nostalgia walking into
Yeah.
that place.
100%.
But like that's a good representation of not moving forward with technology and sticking to the, well, this is how it's always been, this is what I'm going to do. And that's not a growth mindset. That's a very stagnant mindset. So yeah, I just love that, like moving forward and adapting to new technologies.
Yeah, and you made the point earlier that you still like film. It doesn't minimize the significance of whatever technology or process that we had previous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think that's where some people's, I say ego, and that may seem like a harsh word, but it's what we're comfortable with, it's what we're used to, and in some cases, certainly what we've built our business on or a career around. So I understand it. I understand the sensitivity, but it's so easy to get in this kind of either or mindset of this is the way or this is the thing. The reality is both can be true or both can coexist.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do with Cheezoo here is not undercut the existing marketplace or suggest that, you know, taking a picture on a phone is way better than a mirrorless camera or a DSLR. What we're simply doing is in the marketplace, observing what's currently going on. We're going after an opportunity in a segment of the marketplace that is underserved, and we're leveraging technology to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understand where the criticisms are coming from. You know, people are like, how can you suggest that somebody can be a professional photographer or make extra cash with just a camera on their phone? I understand where the criticisms come from. But the reality is that the average consumer, first of all, doesn't really know the difference between an image that we shot with our mirrorless camera or with our phone. And in fact, I would argue the number of bad images that I've seen coming from so-called professionals over the years is staggering, right? So what actually makes a good image of the reality is it's very subjective. So if we can leverage a platform like the iPhone or various Android phones and enable someone who wants to make some extra cash as a photographer to do just that, and then simultaneously to provide affordable photography to somebody who has a limited budget, they understand they're not getting a $5,000 photographer, wedding photographer, a $1,000 portrait photographer. They understand that because they understand they have a limited budget and limited access to those opportunities. What they can still have, though, is these important moments captured and portraits of the important people in their life captured through a more affordable and ultimately more scalable format. Most photographers don't want to go serve this segment of the marketplace. And I spoke about it, John, for years on the podcast, the Book of Podcast, talking about how there's this opportunity because there's such a large number of people, photographers, who are trying to build professional photography businesses, full-time businesses, sustainable businesses. They're going into that top 20, 30%, or at least that's what they're aiming for, while not serving this segment actively. We're simply going there. That's all we're doing. We're not trying to undercut. In fact, we've actually put price caps in place so as to intentionally not undercut the established market. But we're not trying to compete with the established pros. We're simply providing a service, again, using this incredible technology, which, by the way, has been amazing for a long time. I have a picture that I photographed at a friend's wedding. Kenny Kim is a wedding photographer, just an incredible human being, has been in our industry for a long time. But I had the opportunity to go to his wedding in Italy back in 2012. And I had an iPhone 5 at the time. And not very long ago, I actually made a print for him of an image that I took at his wedding with this iPhone 5. The detail from an iPhone 5 back in 2012 was even in the shadows, the shadow detail, incredible, just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful image. If we could do that, over 10 years ago, what we can do with these phones now is amazing. And are there compromises? Absolutely. But again, for somebody who has a more limited budget, they understand that they're making some compromises in that regard. We're simply, we understand not only that there's an opportunity here to serve the segment of the marketplace, that there's a massive hole in that regard, but then also we see where technology is going. And I would say we're still a bit ahead of the curve. So again, I understand the pushback that we're getting, but we understand that's where the marketplace is going, and we're playing to that as well.
Yeah. No, I love that idea. I love, because I'm thinking back to, like, there were years where we didn't have family photos. Like, I would take some tripod in the backyard or something, go to the park, but we didn't hire a photographer to take our photos because we couldn't. We didn't have the funds. We were paying off student loans. We were trying to build a family and all of that. And like, we just didn't have, it wasn't that we didn't value the photography and that we didn't value that, but we couldn't go to a photographer who was charging $500-600 for a portrait session and say, hey, would you do this for 150? Is that okay? Like, we didn't want to do that because it's like undervaluing what they're doing. But like, if there was something like this where we could go and find someone who, we would know, we are not going to get the $600 experience. We're going to get what we're paying for, but it's still going to be a good experience. Like that, I would love to go back and have those family photos from those years where we didn't, because there wasn't that market being served. Or, there were like some photographers charging that, but to your point earlier, like even with the digital cameras and like the DSLRs, I was like, these are not great images. These are like, they have the gear, but they're not using it well. And like, we would not be happy with these photos. So I love that. I think you've talked about ego a couple of times. I think that is a lot of it, is we have that ego of, this is below me. This is, I need to be above this. I need to get to the next level. And like,
I would even take it a step further, John. I would say that there is a sense of that people feel like their ego, in the sense of their identity, their self, is being, and ultimately their ability as a professional is being attacked by the suggestion that someone can be a quote professional photographer using their phone. That it's minimizing their skill set and all that they've done, all that they've built. And I can understand that, but again, the question is, are we willing to set aside? Yeah, it makes us uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we're willing to set that discomfort aside, kind of look at the situation objectively and realize, okay, being a professional photographer right now, it's not about having the fanciest gear. It's not even about skill set anymore, because I mean, there's a certain amount of it, obviously, but
Right.
the cameras are doing so much work. I mean, especially the phones.
Yes.
It's kind of funny actually to watch the releases of these new cameras coming into the established professional industry, releasing this feature and that feature. I'm like, 90% of what they're releasing, I already have on my phone right here. And this
Right.
phone's doing so much with software that it makes me look better than I even am. Right. So that's the reality of the situation. So it's not about skill set per se, or not as much as it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, if the idea of taking a good picture is a commodity that's more widely accessible to the masses, then what's actually going to set me apart as a professional photographer? And that's the better conversation to be had. It's really about the experience that we're creating for our premium clients that is going to set us apart from the experience that somebody with a phone can provide. That's the differentiating factor. And the conversation really needs to center around that. If we're talking about skill set, yeah, my ego would take a hit as well, because I'm like, man, I spent 15, 20 years developing the skill set that now this $1,000 phone can outsmart, and that would suck. That would feel kind of terrible. But if we're willing to realize and acknowledge the fact that now being a professional photographer is so much more about the experience, the overall experience that we're providing, and we focus on that, I'll tell you, John, as a marketer, like if I, as an established professional photographer photographing premium clients, saw Cheezoo, it would be so easy for me to position myself against or market against if I wanted to compete with Cheezoo or call Cheezoo out. It would be so easy for me to do that, because I know what value I have to offer to a premium client or a premium marketplace in comparison and contrast to Cheezoo. So I wouldn't be threatened by that. It does represent a shift in technology, which is a little bit disconcerting. But the reality is that if I'm able to provide an amazing experience for my clients, it'll far surpass. I mean, just far, far surpass what any Cheezoo photographer can provide. And at that point, I don't have to be so concerned about the hit on my ego or ultimately what this is doing to my photography business in the immediate future.
Yeah. And even from like the client facing part of this, like 10 years ago, I used to get questions all the time about like, what kind of gear do you use? Can your camera take photos in low light? Like, we're going to have a candlelight ceremony or something. And like, they would have those questions, worried about like, is the gear good enough? And now it's all about the experience. It's all about like, what do we have? What is this going to look like working with you? And they just assume you've got a good camera. You're going to be able to take good photos. So it's not like they're worried about that. They're looking for an experience. And like, there's I don't know. It's very, things have changed so much. In because they also have this $1,000 little camera phone in their pocket that they're able to take some great photos. Like, I love how easy it is to get a well exposed photo of my kid with the colors in the sky. Like, it's able to get like those HDR type photos on my phone, when on my camera I'm like, okay, well, I've got to like, I'm gonna have to use this light because I know that if I'm at this aperture, I'm not going to be able. The sky's just going to be white, and like with a phone, it's just, it brings it out. Automatic. And yeah, so no, I love it. I love the idea of Cheezoo. I'm very excited for you, and hoping this, like, I know it's going to be amazing moving forward. So I appreciate that. Just cheering on over here.
Yeah, well, we're super early stages at this point. We're really only 3 months or so into kind of marketing the platform, and we're very early stages. But again, what we're trying to do is create an opportunity for those who do want to make extra cash as photographers on the side. This isn't something we're promoting as a full-time business opportunity at the moment. But what we've done is we've created a platform that markets the photographer, where potential clients can come find that photographer in their marketplace in the city that they live in. They can look at the photographer's portfolio, reviews of the photographer, of course, as the platform grows. And then the photographer is able to book that client, payments are processed through that. They can upload the images into a gallery. The gallery is delivered to the client. Prints can be ordered, editing can be ordered by the photographer. All of this is happening in this app. So we haven't just mindlessly said, hey, go be a photographer with your phone.
Right.
There's a lot that is going behind this. In addition to that, we're also have created a variety of educational content. We'll continue to around how to take a better picture with your phone. And to something that I said very early on the podcast episode today, a lot of times it's the, kind of the 20% that's doing 80% of the heavy lifting, right? So if the reality is that we can teach a lot of people how to be a decent photographer with their phone with a few key principles. And so that's what we're doing with our content you'll see on social media and on our website as well. Is here's some basic ideas. Here's how to implement those ideas. And you can, of course, then go practice those ideas and then go make some extra cash with that camera on your phone. And so that's our intention with that. I'll maybe kind of finish with this idea though, John, and hopefully, because I know talking about Cheezoo, that, especially for your professional photographer listeners, they're like, okay, well, this doesn't necessarily relate to me, but I think the big takeaway here that I would encourage everybody listening in, whatever type of business you run or want to run, the big takeaway here is to look in the marketplace for opportunities that are not being capitalized on. And that's, I guess, a relatively simplistic way to think about it. But to use a really tangible example, John, this is one that continues to fascinate me in different ways. I guess maybe the most easy example I can share is if you ever go to a large intersection and you come up on a red light and there's not just one, but two left-hand turn lanes. And what you'll see happen a lot of time is that most people will file into the one lane and then that second lane kind of gets left wide open. And it's a beautiful and I guess some ways kind of a sad representation of human behavior. And certainly we've seen it in the photography industry as well. But we as humans tend to follow suit. We tend to follow what everybody else is doing. And it tends to work out pretty well, right? Somebody paves the way and another person follows, and then you get this momentum and there's opportunity created. So I get it. I also understand people like to minimize that sense of discomfort and instability and go where a trail has already been blazed. But if we just take that example of being at the light, we can follow everybody else into that same line, and there's a good chance that we may not make it through the light as a result because we're all just piled into the same place. I could have spent the extra 2 seconds of effort to move over into that extra lane where nobody else had gone, and now I'm easily through the light and onto the rest of my day.
Yeah.
There are so many opportunities in life and certainly in business to put a bit more effort in. Certainly there may be a little bit more of a struggle or challenge up front, but go a different direction than the masses. When you do that, it creates an opportunity for you to build, in the context of business, a business that may end up being bigger than what you could have built had you just followed everybody else. If you look around the photography industry, most people are, they're shooting the same way, they're saying the same stuff on their websites, they're using the same Lightroom presets and Photoshop actions, and it all just kind of runs together. Look for opportunities to differentiate yourself by doing something different. And what it will do for you, particularly as a business owner, is a really, really cool thing.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it all ties back to like what we were talking about earlier in our personal lives of like, take the 10 minutes to sit there and assess your life, to really soak it in, to see where you are, and like take that minute to soak in, what does the industry look like? Where are some holes that I'm seeing? Where are some underserved people? There are photographers. There's one that I just recently started following. She's amazing. She takes these like super like macro photography or photos of pets.
Okay.
And like she's just like playing with like toys and stuff over the camera, and then it's just these giant heads of dogs and stuff in the photos.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is such an underserved portion of the photography industry because one, there's not a ton of pet photographers, and two, there's not like this artistic like very saturated, highly edited type photos. And there are a lot of people out there that would love a photo of their pet like that to, put up on the mantle or whatever.
But most pet photographers are just going to follow what they're seeing already on Instagram or on other photographers' websites. And so you just see the cycle continue, the same stuff over and over and over and over again. So that's cool. Yeah, that's a beautiful example of doing something different that's going to stand out. I'll give you another one.
Mm.
And for the photographers listening in too, when I started photographing weddings here in Chattanooga back in 2001, it was a very traditional Southern market. This is, again, still back in the film days. So, big medium format cameras, color film, stuffy, stiff poses. And the photographers probably to go with that at times as well. And so that was the marketplace that we came into. And at the time, there was a momentum that was beginning, particularly coming from the West Coast, with what is now commonplace and kind of the norm, but wedding photojournalism. Back in the day, and especially with all the black and white and the creative kind of artistic, that was unusual back then for this marketplace. So when we got into wedding photography here in the Chattanooga market, rather than just doing the same thing that everybody else was doing, what we ended up doing was getting 35 millimeter cameras, shooting lots of black and white film, and ultimately bringing a style to the marketplace that enabled us to stand out pretty quickly. We did a bridal show one year, actually, and I built a booth with a friend of mine that was made up of 3 doors. We covered it in foam, wrapped it in this faux black leather. And then instead of, again, doing the kind of traditional photographer thing and having these, big 16 by 20 with gold frames on easels in the booth, we did these smaller, I think they were 8 by 10 or 8 by 12 textured art print mounted on foam core. Like 60% or so of the images were in black and white and mounted on this display with lighting. And so brides are walking around the bridal show and they're seeing, again, all the same stuff. It all just kind of runs together. And then they come by our booth and there is an immediate distinction. It looks nothing like anybody else. And so these are just a couple of small examples, but the encouragement, again, is to those listening in, stop kind of going into autopilot mode. I know at times we almost have to, just for the sake of some level of stability and consistency. But if we really want to create a business that is not only going to do well, but even, I guess, more significantly enable us to be able to build that business more quickly in many cases, be willing to take a chance, take a risk, and do something different. Look where everybody else is and go the opposite direction. There's a book, John, called Lateral Thinking by Edward de Bono. It's a super deep dive, I will say. But one of the things, what the premise of the book is how to intentionally be creative. And, most artists would probably say, well, my art is just an inspiration. It comes in the moment. I can't control it. I can't do it. But he argues, the premise of this book is you can actually intentionally be creative. And one of the simplest ways that he suggests that you can be creative is just to simply look at it upside down or to turn it around backwards. We're all used to looking at it from the same, whatever it is, personal life, business life, looking at things from the same angle. And if we're willing to take a step back, turn around and look at it from a different angle, upside down, backwards, there might be an opportunity that we see to do something different that will enable us to stand out and as a result be able to market our business more effectively.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Yeah, it's we get in the same rut that everyone else has made, and we just kind of like fall in line and just do the same thing.
That's
and
it. Yep.
And yeah, like stepping out, looking at things differently, turning it upside down, looking at something that like really hit hard with me, that I have continued to go back to is Erica and Lanny Mann with Two Man Studios. They talk about like they view every photo shoot like a child, like with the curiosity of a child.
Curiosity.
Like, where can we do something different? How can we do something that we've never done before in a photo shoot? I see this tree over here. What can we do? Can we shoot through these leaves? And like something like that, and 90% of it may not be great, but like that curiosity,
that's it.
And that like different viewpoint is going to open you up to things that you never would have known if you just kept going straight ahead like everyone else.
Don't be a sheep. At least that's how I think about it. Like, don't just be a follower. Everybody is. Everybody, generally speaking, most people are followers, and certainly I've been guilty of it. It's easy to. It's comfortable to. You can see the road ahead. And you can follow a workshop and a course and do the thing and get it done. And I get how that works and why it can work and even be beneficial in the context of also being creative and kind of stepping outside the box. But don't make that your kind of go-to, your standard. Look for opportunities. I love the way that you frame that, John, which is curiosity. In fact, it's part of my value set is continue, even at 45 and certainly beyond, to continue to be curious that enables us to learn and to grow, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
see opportunities that others aren't. If you're gonna be the sheep, if you're just gonna follow everybody, then it's going to be easy to get stuck in a rut and then ultimately potentially lose, because now you're just following that momentum that's going this particular direction while the market is shifting. And
Yeah.
we get into that defensive mode that we were talking about earlier. So yeah, don't be a sheep. Be curious, try new things, be creative, be willing to take a risk here and there. And the opportunity on the other side of that is so amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really hard, like being a sheep as a wedding photographer too, because if you do wake up and you're like, oh, I want to change things up. It's like, oh, I've already booked out 18 months of
Mm,
doing the same thing. And it's like, it's a lot harder to pivot because they've already hired you for a certain type
mm,
of experience and photo and all that. So yeah, the earlier that you can start experimenting and doing things, Fair Oristi says, like in his early career, he did like 98% was what the client hired
mm.
him to do, and then the other 2% was new stuff that he was like, that they might not like this, but it's for me. And then soon everyone wanted that 2%, and
Yeah,
everyone was like, oh, that I will hire
yeah,
you for the 2%.
yeah.
So, oh man, Nathan, this has been so good. I have loved this whole conversation. um, Before we wrap up, there's part of the show that I like to do where we talk about what we're loving this week, and it can
Mm,
be literally anything.
mm.
What are you loving this week?
It's hard to pick one thing. I would
I know.
say, yeah, I would say right now, um, I'd have to go back to my workouts. In a time in my life right now where there's been a lot of shift and a lot of change, certainly a
Mhm.
lot of challenge, launching a new company and so forth. The kind of daily ritual of going and putting in some manual labor. As photographers and business owners, most of the time we're sitting around on on a laptop at a desk
Yeah.
or a table or wherever we might be, and there's just not a lot of hard work or sweat involved, aside from maybe the occasional shoot. But like on a daily basis, going and pushing hard and sweating and pushing beyond my discomfort
Mhm.
and doing the thing that I may not always feel like doing. I'm learning discipline and building my character in doing that. My body is getting fitter and healthier as a result. It gives me this outlet and this release that I wouldn't have otherwise. And so that's the thing, man. And I know that maybe sounds a little cliche coming from me, and we talked about fitness earlier, but I cannot stress enough, for especially for those who aren't necessarily as active or don't have structured regimen in place for their activity or for what it is that they eat. It really makes all the difference in the world if you can even take those little small steps like we were talking about, the little 1% change, 1% improvement.
Mhm.
I would encourage everybody with that. But that's the thing that I'm loving at the end of the day. I'll add a bonus one though. It's
Okay.
starting to get warmer here, and my motorcycle's sitting right outside here. And man, to get back out on the motorcycle again
Oh
and
yeah.
that air and riding fast and whatnot, oh, it's so good. So that's the other thing that I'm loving right now.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, I love that. It's also getting a little bit warmer here, and like that's something that I'm loving is we're we used to, when my wife and I first started dating, we would, every day that we were hanging out together, we would go for a long walk, and we would just walk around the neighborhood. We would go to a park and walk around. We would just like really enjoyed that. Um, Not so much the face to face kind of conversation. I've heard this before of like the windshield conversations where you can get like really deep, where you're driving with someone and you're both just looking
Mm,
out the windshield. You're
mm-hmm,
not looking at each other in the eye, where
mm-hmm.
things can kind of get weird, or like you can feel like, I don't know
Yeah,
if I can talk about this, but
yeah,
like
yeah.
you're both looking out, and us just walking, we would get into such deep conversations
Mm,
and like really really open up together, which I think was a huge catalyst
mm.
in our dating life, that just like projected us quickly forward to marriage. But
Cool.
like we've really enjoyed doing that again, and having the kids all with their little scooters and trikes and stuff, and just taking nice cool evening walks that aren't frigid anymore. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm loving. And then bonus for me, because I'm going to do two too.
Yeah, man. Do 5. Let's go.
Yeah, here's the list. I do have other podcasts this week, so I should save some for them.
Okay.
But we recently, so it was spring break this last week, and the kids were off at my parents', and we had a date night. We went to go see Dune 2, and it was really good. The first one was good. It was I thought it was decent. I was confused the first time that I watched it because I was like, I don't know, there's a lot of names that I'm not familiar with. So we rewatched that again before going to see the second one. But the second one was like really, really great. I enjoyed it a lot. A lot of action sequences, a lot of like a good dialogue from the characters, and like the new characters that were introduced were great, and great acting. So yeah, I
just saw that last night actually in the IMAX.
Oh, nice.
Theater here in town. Massive, what is it, 80 some odd foot screen, and it's just a huge thing. And then the sound to go with it, to the point where I was surprised I didn't get a notification from my watch. You know, Apple Watches will give you the notification about things being too loud. It was so loud in there. But yeah, it's super powerful. I was kind of like you even with this one, because I saw the first one, and similar to you, I was like, it's all right. And the second one, I really should have watched the first one again before going to the second one, just to remember all the terminology and the names and so forth. But there was still a lot to take away from it. It was a really beautiful, very powerful movie. I especially was taken by the love story that was depicted. I thought it was really lovely too. So yeah, I just saw that last night. So that's cool.
Nice. Yeah. I really like that love story too, because it wasn't like the, I don't know, cliche kind of quintessential like hero, and then he finds this girl and all of that, and it was very, very different, and there was like a lot of them like disagreeing and butting heads against each other.
The conflict,
a lot of conflict. Yes,
it's refreshing. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's refreshing to see that different dynamic. And spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it and is going to, but part of what was interesting about that storyline to me was, he, toward the end of the movie, he's suggesting that he still loves Zendaya's character. I don't remember what her name is, but for the sake of political alliance, is going to probably go be with this other woman. But he maintains this love for her. He's like, I'm going to love you till my last breath, or till I have no more breath.
Right.
And it was just this beautiful kind of dichotomy and interesting study, I guess, and romantic relationship of a different kind, because we are so used to the kind of the cliches. So yeah, I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I did too. And some of the fight sequences too were just like so good. But yeah, okay, well, cool. I love that. I love that you saw that yesterday too.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell everyone where they can follow you, where they can check out all the things that you're doing.
Easiest place probably is just, if you search Nathan Holritz, it's going to you'll find your way there, because it's a little bit of a unique name. I'm Nathan Holritz on Facebook, HOLRITZ, Nathan Holritz on Facebook and Instagram. Cheezoo.com, you can check out what we're doing there, CHEEZOO.com. And then photographersedit.com, just like it sounds, photographer with an S, plural, photographersedit.com, for those of you professional photographers who need editing this season. By actual editors, by the way. We understand there are AI solutions out there that are cheaper, but actually having individual editors who are looking at the images and making sure it matches your style, doing that work for you, that's what we're offering and specializing in. So photographersedit.com.
Awesome. Well, cool. Yeah, and I'll have all that linked in the show notes for y'all. You can just scroll down and click and go follow Nathan. But yeah, Nathan, thank you so much for being back on the show. It was great to sit down with you again.
My privilege, man. Thanks for having me on. This is cool.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh, tomorrow. If you're watching live, I'll see you tomorrow for another episode. Bye, y'all.